Persona 5's story uses an in medias res opening and establishes the first 3/4 or so of the game to be Joker recalling the events that led up to him being locked in an interrogation room with Sai Nijima. The problem, though, is that the writers don't actually adhere to this story perspective, but still make use of it when it's convenient for them. I gave an overview of my thoughts on this in the video Persona 5 Design Critique Story Framing, link in the description. I'd recommend you watch that video before this one because I want my videos to get as many views as possible. But if you're too lazy to watch that, the really short version is that I think Joker should have been more honest and thorough in what he tells Sai, such that Sai is seeing everything we are, rather than us seeing Joker's memories and being uncertain how much of it Sai is seeing. Also, I think they should have actually stuck to this perspective rather than constantly using an omniscient story's perspective while utilizing the interrogation framing only when it's convenient for them. This video is going to take an in-depth look at how these suggested changes would actually affect the presentation of the story. How in-depth? Well, while making these videos, I did a second playthrough of Persona 5, during which I did my best to make note of every scene in the game that breaks perspective. Shall we take a look? First, there are a couple of general things to note. Establishing shots, i.e. views of the location the following scene will take place in, will not be noted as these do not divulge any plot information. Also, the chatter between scenes, i.e. the speech bubbles shown over a location backdrop, are fine as far as I'm concerned, as they're simply showing the general views of the public and it can be assumed the Joker overhears this sort of chatter as he's walking around. Now, from the beginning. During the in medias res opening, there is a brief scene of Sai talking with some guards before entering the interrogation room, which lets us know that Sai's superiors don't particularly want her talking to Joker. This can instead be conveyed with Sai putting a bit more emphasis on telling Joker that she doesn't have much time. On April 10th, and note, dates are based on my playthrough, not all events are guaranteed to occur on a specific date. So, April 10th, Kawakami and Kamoshida are seen talking about Joker. This scene is unnecessary and can be cut. Later, we see the subway conductor having some weird freaky seizure or some shit, which leads to the subway derailing. We hear about the derailing on the TV, and there's plenty of NPC chatter suggesting the weird phenomenon that caused it. Next, there's a scene with Sai talking to the SIU director. As a general note, I think it would actually be good to have at least some of these scenes still included, making it clear that these are things Sai is telling Joker about. However, not all of them would work well as such. This one, for instance, is before Sai has any reason to trust or divulge anything to Joker. Regardless, I'll be mentioning all of them for thoroughness' sake. Fortunately, though, there's not really anything important in this scene, or the one after it with Sai talking to Akechi. On April 11th, Sojiro has a pointless conversation with a customer, and Kawakami spends a few seconds wondering where Joker is. More importantly, though, there's a scene of the SIU director talking about how things are going as planned, but notes that Sai may be an issue. This establishes that he and others in the SIU are likely corrupt, but that Sai is not part of this corruption. This is the first notable thing that would have to be lost from the story. There are numerous scenes like this giving hints and foreshadowing the activities of the game's antagonists, most of which would simply need to be cut to maintain the story perspective. Personally, I don't have a problem with this. It's certainly not necessary for following the story, so it's ultimately a matter of preference whether you think these antagonist updates are an important aspect of enjoying the story. I'd be perfectly fine if the antagonist activities were less known, and in some cases may even prefer there being more mystery in what they're doing. Plus, we'd still be able to get plenty of insight into most of the villains via their shadows. Though, I suppose that doesn't apply to the SIU director, but, does anybody honestly give a shit about the SIU director? I sure don't. Anyway, April 12th. First, there's a scene of eavesdropping done right. See, Joker comes out of the classroom and happens to see Kamoshida talking with An. This is exactly the kind of thing that should happen for the scene later with An and Shiho having a conversation that establishes that they're close friends and implies that Kamoshida is mistreating Shiho. They have another conversation on April 14th with more serious implications of Shiho being mistreated. This occurs right after Ryuji suggesting Joker talk to An about Kamoshida, so again, Joker could accidentally eavesdrop the important bits of this. There's also a bit of superfluous dialogue between student NPCs that can either be overheard or cut. On April 15th, cut the shot of An eavesdropping on Joker and Ryuji 10 seconds before she reveals herself to them. Also, cut An entering the palace on her own and being captured, since we figure this out soon after anyway. Lastly, An being taunted by Shadow Kamoshida needs to occur entirely after the party arrives, which should be an easy change to make. And then we get to jump all the way to May 6th, when the principal asks Makoto to find out if any students were involved with Kamoshida's change of heart. And honestly, this is one of those times where I think it would have been better to leave things more mysterious at first. Let Makoto start sniffing around Joker without us knowing why. As for the principal pulling her strings, she can tell us about that once she joins the Phantom Thieves. As for the principal's strings being pulled, i.e. his phone call after Makoto leaves his office, I don't think there's much value in knowing this. It can be hinted at through Makoto, then when the principal is killed later, I think most people would be able to infer that he was wrapped up with the other antagonists. May 7th, Yusuke is shown watching the party. It's probably fine for him to be in the background, but don't draw special attention to him without Joker having a reason to look his way. May 15th, Yusuke and An have a conversation at Madarami's art exhibit. There's nothing crucial in this scene, but it still has some worthwhile stuff, plus Joker and Ryuji are at the exhibit anyway, so just throw in a little more of that eavesdropping thing. On the 16th, there's another expendable scene with the SIU director. On the 17th, the bit with Morgana exploring Madarami's workshop will have to be summarized to Joker by Morgana after the fact. And that brings us to May 21st, which has what I consider to be the first truly significant change. That is, the first scene that can't be cut without losing something significant, and that can't easily be changed to have Joker present. This is the scene of An and Yusuke unlocking the Peacock door and discovering the room full of Sayuris. Firstly though, the part of this scene leading up to unlocking the door is a lot less necessary. It's mostly played for comedic effect, not even that effectively in my opinion, and ultimately only matters in that they successfully open the door. I would cut this scene and replace it by extending the scene with Joker and Ryuji waiting in Madarami's palace near the barrier, wondering if the plan will work. This can also have a bit of comedic effect with Ryuji stressing about it and going on about how An and Morgana will probably screw it up, with Joker having occasional dialogue choices to either goad him on or shut him up. Ultimately, the palace security system will disable and Joker and Ryuji will proceed through as they already do. And now comes the trickier part, An and Yusuke confronting Madarami in the Sayuri room. This scene is the beginning of Yusuke questioning Madarami's character and exposes more of Madarami's unscrupulous activities. So, how might we go about removing this scene? First, we need to get to the point of An, Yusuke, and Morgana entering the palace. Personally, I would add a Sayuri room of some sort to the palace itself, either a room full of Sayuris similar to the real world, or preferably some distorted representation thereof. Take a minute having Joker and Ryuji wandering around this room, wondering what the fuck it is and what it means. Then, when appropriate, have them head back to where the others fall on top of them as it already occurs. At this point, if you want to cheat and have the important scenes still included as is, you could frame it as a story within a story. Like, Ryuji could ask if they know what's up with the Sayuri room, then An could be like, "You're not gonna believe this, we found a room full of Sayuris," then cue flashback and show us the scene. But let's see what we can do without cheating. After the whole party reunites inside the palace, have the scene play out the same up to the point An says, "Kitagawa-kun, didn't it cross your mind that something wasn't right about Madarame?" And instead have her say something like, "Kitagawa-kun, didn't you see the room full of Sayuris?" Then Ryuji can comment about the room full of Sayuris in the palace. The party then goes to the room where there's a bunch of Sayuris distorted in some way that represents how Madarame only sees them as a source of money. While there, Yusuke and An get into an argument about Madarame's excuse for why he has a room full of Sayuris, cluing us into what happened in there. Then, once we get all the necessary info, the scene can fall right back into its current script a couple lines after where we left it, with An saying, "You may not want to believe it, but this is another reality as viewed through Madarame's eyes." If done well, I think something like this could be a pretty good substitute. It may still be a small sacrifice, but unless you really like seeing An wear 24 shirts and then awkwardly try to pretend to flirt with Yusuke, I don't think too much of value would have to be lost. And now we get to jump ahead to June 5th. We get a street view of Madarame's confession on a big screen with various NPCs commenting. Plus, Akechi and Makoto both get a throwaway line. Nothing of value occurs outside of the confession itself, so just have Joker watching it somewhere. Then, at the end of the Phantom Thieves public meeting about how they're Phantom Thieves, Makoto sees us and finds it interesting that Yusuke is among our ranks. Joker actually kinda notices this, but I'm not sure if he actually sees her, and he almost definitely didn't hear her mention Yusuke. So, like with Yusuke's stalking before, either make Joker actually notice it or cut it. Its only real value is a bit of foreshadowing. Next we see Sai talk about how she wants to investigate the change of heart and mental shutdown phenomenons as potentially connected cases, which the SIU director weakly objects to but allows her to pursue. I don't think there's anything important here, but if we want her and Joker to have more of a rapport like I suggested in my related video, this could be a good place to have Sai start telling Joker a little about her side of things. And finally, after Sai leaves, there's a bit more bad guy foreshadowing that would have to be cut. At this point, over the next fortnight or so, there's a bunch of scenes showing Makoto's activities. I'm going to ignore the impact removing these scenes would have on Makoto as I go through them, then consider what should be done for Makoto at the end of it. So, June 6th, Makoto and the principal are talking again. Honestly, I don't care about the principal and how much of a dick he is, so moving on. June 7th has a scene of Makoto and some other student council members getting a request from a student about being targeted by a criminal organization. We can wait to learn about these criminals when Joker does. On June 8th, On overhears some students rumoring that Makoto possibly knew about Kamoshida's abuse and shit, which pisses On off. This scene could easily be changed to have Joker standing there silently, as he is wont to do. There's also a scene with Makoto and the principal where Makoto wants to help the student being targeted by the criminal org, and the principal tells her to focus on the Phantom Thieves. Still don't need to know that the principal's a dick. June 11th. After walking away from her confrontation with the Phantom Thieves, Makoto briefly laments being unable to do anything about Kamoshida. Also, when we're back at Leblon, Sojiro asks On if she has a boyfriend after everyone else goes upstairs. These can both be cut. That evening, we see Makoto and Sai watching Akechi on TV and discussing the Phantom Thieves. This has some minor character development. On the 12th, Akechi and Makoto have a conversation. This is an unfortunate loss, as it's an interesting little conversation, however, nothing important is learned, so it can be cut. The scene does reveal the character of the two of them some, but not in any way that we don't see plenty of elsewhere. Also June 12th, Yusuke and Sojiro have a conversation. We lose a bit of vague info on why Sojiro decided to take Joker in, which is unfortunate but acceptable. There's also some Yusuke development, as well as him deciding to return to the dorms. I think this can be maintained by modifying the relevant parts to occur in a more condensed form at the end of the conversation, which Joker catches as he comes downstairs. June 15th. The principal suddenly cares about the Mafia fucking with his students, so he tells Makoto to fix it, because that's reasonable. Regardless, still don't care about the principal. On the 18th, Ida, the student caught up in the Mafia shit, begs Makoto to help. Don't think anyone really cares about him either. Then on June 19th, Sai goes full bitch mode on Makoto for no reason. I guess this is supposed to be foreshadowing that Sai's going to have a palace, but, I don't really see any reason Sai would tell Joker at this point. You know, I remember around that time Makoto asked me an innocuous question about how our deceased father might have felt about the Phantom Thieves. I totally went apeshit on her. So, yeah, this scene needs to be cut. And now, on June 20th, we reach the climax of Makoto's stupidity when she goes to confront the Mafia boss with no real plan whatsoever. Though Joker witnesses most of this, there are a few flashbacks that Makoto has while talking with us that would have to be cut, and a brief bit later with Makoto and Kaneshiro before Joker arrives, which can easily be shifted to happen after Joker arrives. But now we must figure out how to handle Makoto's activities over the past couple weeks. As I see it, there's basically two important aspects to consider. First, the establishing and development of Makoto's character. As I mentioned back at the beginning of May, I actually think it might be better to leave Makoto less developed up to this point. Let us see her more similarly to how Joker does. That is, a thorn in our side. The game as it is makes sure we know Makoto is trying to do what she thinks is right, but is also being pressured into investigating the Phantom Thieves. But why do we need to know that? Let us think she's a bitch out to get us for her own personal gain like On accuses her of. Let us wonder if maybe she did know something about Kamoshida after hearing that rumor. While we would definitely be losing some character development for Makoto, there's plenty of time left to get to know her after she joins the Phantom Thieves. Of course, this would definitely be a significant change to the game's presentation and our initial impressions of Makoto, and it's a matter of opinion which way would be better, as well as how much better. Personally, though, I think it could at least be just as good with a more mysterious and antagonistic introduction of Makoto. The other important aspect of Makoto's scenes over the last 2 weeks is how it shows Makoto being pressured from multiple angles to get shit done, which explains her aggressiveness towards the Phantom Thieves, as well as her eventual, utterly retarded frontal charge into the Lion's Den. One way this could be somewhat shown is by having her get even more frustrated and pushy with the Phantom Thieves. As it is, she's bossy and unreasonable towards them, but doesn't show too much desperation. Let some of it through and maybe let the other characters call her out on it a bit. I also think this would be a great time to utilize Sai in the interrogation room. Have her initially offended by Joker bringing Makoto into the story, as is currently the case, but then, through these couple weeks, have more interrogation room scenes or some of those Makoto-Sai scenes where Sai is telling us that Makoto was acting weird at the time. Have Joker and Sai figure out together just why Makoto acted so monumentally stupid. Again, this is a big change, but I don't think it would be a bad one, so I'll be leaving it at that. A couple more things to finish off June. On the 20th, after Joker goes to bed, Morgana wonders if Joker is special. This is redundant foreshadowing at this point. On the 21st, Anna and Makoto apologize to each other for some unkind words they exchanged earlier about the whole Kamoshida incident. Joker could overhear the important parts of this conversation, or you could just find other ways to show they're becoming friends in other scenes. And now we jump a couple weeks to July. On the 5th, we see Kaneshiro receiving his calling card. The fact that it successfully pisses him off can instead be learned when we enter the palace. His henchman also mentions something about higher-ups, which I guess is supposed to be minor foreshadowing. Maybe replace this scene with Joker noticing some people noticing the calling card spread all over the place. Then at the end of the day, there's a brief scene of the SIU director bitching at the principal about not getting shit done. If it wasn't clear already, I really don't care about these characters. Then there's a few things on July 9th. Sai reflects on Kaneshiro's capture by the Phantom Thieves. This could be changed to be a brief conversation in the interrogation room. Then we see Akechi looking at his phone and saying, quote, "The Phantom Thieves. Damn it." Literally the whole scene. Cut it. In the afternoon, we see Makoto tell off the principal. This is a nice little scene for Makoto, but seeing as we haven't seen any of her previous interactions with Humpty Dumbass, there's no need for this one either. After Makoto leaves, the principal calls probably the SIU director and has a rather stressful little chat. Still don't care. Finally, in the evening, Makoto and Sai have a conversation about Kaneshiro. Sai laments that Kaneshiro's capture by the Phantom Thieves ruined her chances of getting credit for catching him. This is another thing she could tell Joker directly in the interrogation room. Or show us the scene as she tells Joker about it if we don't want to lose the bit of development the sisters get. Oh, except for the bit after Sai leaves where Makoto says she's found a place she belongs. That just has to be cut. Oh well. July 10th has a couple foreshadowing scenes that would need to be cut. First, a bit more with the SIU director, possibly including the first confirmation that he knows of the metaverse. Then, later on, we see our first glimpse of Futaba as she's listening in on our study session. Then on July 18th, we have to cut another instance of Futaba listening in on us and taking interest when Medjed is mentioned. And another one on the 19th. And then we finally get something a little more substantive on July 24th. Sai and Akechi talk about the Phantom Thieves and mental shutdowns, with Akechi suggesting that they're done by the same people. There's also a line indirectly revealing that Futaba's mom was a mental shutdown victim. Pretty sure this is the first we're hearing of that. Still, none of this is necessary and would have to be cut, or told to Joker through Sai's perspective. At the end of the day, we see Futaba listening in on our conversation about her having a palace and see Morgana run out of the room. We can obviously still have the conversation, and Morgana already tells us about Futaba listening, so this can be cut. Maybe just add a little more detail to Morgana's report. Next day, July 25th, when we enter Futaba's palace for the first time, there are a couple scenes of Futaba in her room hallucinating. First, she hears a bunch of voices taunting her right after we hear similar voices in the palace. We've already heard that she's hearing voices from Sojiro, so perhaps have Morgana surmise that the voices we're hearing are the voices she hears. Later, we see her having a hallucination of her mother. For better or worse, I think this just gets cut. Then a few weeks go by as we clear Futaba's palace, until some rather important events on August 15th. Right after deciding to send the calling card, there's a scene with Futaba being taunted by Shadow Futaba, as well as discovering the Metaverse app on her phone. The taunting will have to be lost. As for foreshadowing Futaba entering the palace, it can be hinted at a bit more strongly when we're there giving her the calling card. Makoto already directly asks her if she has the app, just have her be a bit worse at lying about it. Next, right after everyone except Morgana leave, Futaba actually reads the calling card. Just replace this with a scene of everyone waiting outside her room until Morgana comes out and tells us we're good to go. Then there's the scene of Futaba actually entering the palace. No reason this can't be a surprise, not that it actually would be to most. Regardless, just reveal it to us when she catches up to the Phantom Thieves. Lastly, we have a very important scene of Futaba confronting her shadow and beginning to realize that her mother didn't hate her. Fortunately, it shouldn't be too hard to prepend or otherwise combine this with the following scene where she has further revelations and ultimately awakens to her persona in front of the party. As such, we'll move on to August 22nd. Sojiro and a couple customers see Shido going on about the Phantom Thieves on TV. Joker can see Shido on TV, and he can see the people's reactions too if needed, though I personally don't see any real value in this scene. In the evening, there's another scene between Sai and Akechi. Sai is upset that the Phantom Thieves are making the police look bad. Akechi continues to push the idea that the Phantom Thieves are also behind the mental shutdowns. As with previous scenes like this, it either needs to be cut or framed in a way that has Sai telling Joker about it. On August 29th, we see our favorite waste of screen time again. The SIU director is happy to see the Phantom Thieves' popularity rising, foreshadowing some scheme. Also foreshadows the principal's disposal. Cut it. That night, we see a freaky dream that Morgana has, followed by him worrying that he might not actually be human. Joker wakes up a bit later and they have a conversation. Cut the dream and have Joker quietly wake up a bit sooner to overhear some of Morgana's worrying. Then on September 1st, the principal's demise is further foreshadowed, with him on the phone being very apologetic and distressed due to his failure to produce any results in finding the Phantom Thieves. September 2nd, we see Kawakami talking to students about the Kamoshida cover-up rumors. We heard about the cover-up investigation 3 times already on the way to school, so this scene is superfluous. Kawakami also has a conversation with Makoto, letting her know that she and some other third years will have to stand in as chaperones on the Hawaii trip. Joker can be informed of this by either Makoto or Kawakami. Then at the end of September 2nd, we have Makoto hacking Sai's laptop. This scene could be cut and Joker simply informed of Makoto's success in the morning as he already is. But that would be boring. I think it would be more fun if this scene was replaced with a phone conversation. It could start with Makoto sending something like, "Okay, Sis is in the bath and I've put the device into her laptop. How long is this going to take?" And from there, everyone could join in on the conversation. Repeatedly ask how it's going, panic when Makoto says Sai's getting out of the bath, and of course hear that the operation was a success at the end. On September 9th, we see Futaba working the data and Morgana working on throwing himself a massive pity party. We already know Futaba's working on the data, and Morgana's shit has and will have plenty of other scenes, so just cut this. Also, cut the foreshadowing so blatant that I'm hesitant to even refer to it as such about killing the principal. And then on September 11th, they kill the principal. Have to cut the scene of his death. We'll hear about it on the news or at school, same as Joker. On the 12th, there's a scene with Sai telling Makoto about the principal and suggesting that she thinks it was the Phantom Thieves' doing. Makoto tells us about this tomorrow anyway, though I think a little more detail should be added to that scene if this one is cut. Of course, as usual, this scene could be kept if Sai tells Joker about it. September 13th. After his tantrum, Morgana talks to himself a bit outside, and Haru for some reason takes notice of him. Nothing of value is lost. Right after that, we have a scene between Sai and Akechi. This is a pretty notable scene. Sai's fully bought into the idea that the Phantom Thieves are behind the mental shutdowns, and she thinks they're associated with Okumura Foods. She also expresses a willingness to break the rules if it's necessary to catch the Phantom Thieves, which Akechi condemns her a bit for before leaving. Unfortunate, but nothing is crucial, so this would have to be cut. Or told to Joker by Sai. Finally, on the 13th, we see Morgana's gotten his ass kicked in Okumura's palace and is approached by Haru. This has a little more value than their last scene, but not enough for me to care about it getting cut. In fact, I think I'd prefer it if we were left wondering what was going on with Morgana, same as Joker has to. Same goes for the scene on the 14th, with Morgana and Haru starting to actually get shit done in Okumura's palace. On September 15th, we see Akechi spying on us as we enter Okumura's palace. This is not something Joker can notice at this point, so cut it. Only foreshadowing is lost. On September 16th, we see Haru talking with her father. We see the man to be a jackass and learn about Haru's arranged political marriage. We already know about the former and can learn about the latter later on with Joker. On September 17th, Morgana and Haru run into Haru's fiancé, who acts like a total douche and throws Morgana into the wall. This is an important scene, but the party already shows up about halfway through it, so just shift things a bit to make sure the party gets there a little earlier, say right after Morgana hits the wall, and make sure none of the important stuff is omitted. Shouldn't be too hard to accomplish. Lastly, for this stretch of the calendar, on September 18th, Haru's dad pretty much tells the girl to go prostitute herself to the douche she's supposed to marry. The scene itself would have to be cut, but the important info is told to the party the same evening. Just start that scene a bit earlier so we hear about it too. A few weeks later, October 8th, we get to send the jackass a calling card, but we'll have to cut the scene of him receiving it. Haru can tell us about it, and as usual, we can see the effects once we enter the palace. And then we have the black masked person assassinating Shadow Okumura after we leave with his treasure. This is one of those things that I actually think would be better if we didn't see it. We could be surprised at Okumura's sudden death and have to wonder what exactly happened along with everyone else. Granted, this is a significant change to the story's presentation, and while I think it would be for the better, I can respect the opinion of people who prefer it the way it is. Still, if we want to stick to Joker's perspective, we don't have a choice. It has to be cut. And what day would be complete without an asinine foreshadowing scene with the game's most pointless character, the SIU director? I don't even care enough to go back and look at what he said in this scene. Just fucking cut it. Finally, the day ends with Morgana having his freaky birth dream again and worrying about his humanness or lack thereof. Just like last time, either cut it or have Joker wake up and notice him worrying. October 11th, Sai and Akechi have a scene discussing the Okumura case. This is simply an update on their thoughts and progress on the Phantom Thieves, nothing too important. Then on the 12th, Sai is investigating Okumura's place, finds his calling card, then receives a call from a subordinate telling her they found a calling card at the principal's office. That last bit is the real significance of the scene, and Sai already mentions it to us in the interrogation room. Also, Haru is there and asks the Phantom Thieves about it soon after. October 13th beats us over the head with some more foreshadowing from Mr. SIU Director. Then on October 20th, he assigns Sai the task of, quote, eradicating the Phantom Thieves. This is obviously something Sai could tell Joker about at this point, but otherwise would have to be cut. That wouldn't be too much of a problem though, because in the following scene, Sai tells Makoto about the assignment, which would also have to be cut, but Makoto telling the rest of the Phantom Thieves about it wouldn't, so we're good here. October 21st, SIU Director. Moving on. October 26th, we see that Sojiro has found Futaba's calling card. This is just a bit of foreshadowing for the scene that will be occurring this evening. But before that, we get to see more of our favorite SIU Director. At least this is another scene with Sai, for the most part. He heavily pressures her to get results in the Phantom Thieves case, and basically suggests using any means necessary. Then after Sai leaves, there's a throwaway line from the SIU Director that we'll gladly throw away. Next morning, Sojiro and Morgana are watching the news for a minute before Joker comes downstairs. This could easily be edited to start with Joker's arrival, and maybe a couple slight tweaks to the rest of the scene. After that scene, we see the SIU Director brag about being evil a little more. On October 28th, Shido gives a public speech in the evening, and a bunch of people watching talk about how awesome Shido seems. The effects of this scene can be achieved through the TV or even Joker wandering by during the speech. Not that there's anything too important in this scene to begin with. And now, surprisingly, we get to jump all the way to November 18th when Makoto gives Sai her calling card. Same deal as the other calling cards, Makoto can tell us she got it and we can see the effects in her palace. Afterwards, Sai makes a phone call to tell probably the SIU Director that she got a calling card. He tells her to stand by and that someone else is taking charge of the case. Again, this is the type of thing Sai can tell Joker about, otherwise it's not really needed. And finally, on November 20th, we once again see Sai right outside the interrogation room being met with resistance and ultimately being told she won't have long. Which, honestly, I think should be cut in general. What the fuck do these people consider long? I mean, I know Joker hasn't been telling Sai everything in nearly as much detail as we've seen, but they have to have been in there for at least an hour at this point, and I'd consider that a very low estimate. But I'm getting sidetracked. Point is, this scene can be cut. And with that, we've caught up to the opening. Mission accomplished. We can drop the perspective and the rest of the story can remain as is. Or at least that's one way to go. On the other hand, you could still try to keep things in Joker's perspective through to the end. And my brain's already numb, so what the fuck, let's keep this train rolling. Next up, our biggest obstacle yet. Probably the biggest in the whole game. Numerous scenes showing the execution of the plan that pretty much the entire game has been building to will need to be cut. Fuck. Sadly, my hands are rather tied, so let's just take a look at what we'll be losing. First, there's Sai showing Akechi the phone and their surrounding conversation, then Akechi killing Cognitive Joker, a pointless bit with Sojiro breaking something, Akechi discussing the progress of their plans with Shido, the SIU Director being killed, huzzah, Futaba instructing Sai over the phone about how to rescue Joker, and lastly, all the party members seeing the news that the leader of the Phantom Thieves has been caught. No big deal, right? Well, I never said nothing of value would be lost. Anyway, let's see what we can salvage. When Sai leaves the interrogation, stay with Joker for a while. Maybe even have him pull out a small watch or hourglass or something and intensely stare at it. Then, when it expires, have him pull out that cocky grin like he already does. Cut to a bit later when Sai worriedly comes into the interrogation room and says something like, "You're alive. I don't know why, but a minute ago I had the weirdest feeling that you'd been killed." Then give Joker some response options like, "Then it worked," or "Not this me," or "You did good." Basically, Sai reacts to the Cognitive Joker in her palace being killed. I'm not entirely sure how well this fits into the established lore, but I'm pretty sure some of the other palace owners have had reactions to things that occur in their palaces, so I'm gonna say it's fine. Anyway, regardless of Joker's dialogue, Sai says something like, "I'll have to ask what you mean later, we need to get out of here." Then for funsies, let's have Joker stand up and get hit hard by the drugs and finally just pass out as Sai rushes forward to try and catch him. Next we see, Sai's brought Joker somewhere safe. Not to Sojiro right away though, as she does in the actual story. I want a scene between these two first. Sai can start with a joke about how it was rather difficult to get him out of there after he passed out on her. Then she'll ask Joker about what happened to Akechi, and he'll give some cryptic answer which will prompt Sai to give her view of events. And now we can salvage a couple of the earlier scenes as Joker gets told a story from Sai for the last time before we're stuck purely in the first-person perspective. Specifically, we get back the scene of Sai showing the phone to Akechi and the scene of Futaba instructing her on how to save Joker. I would also move the final confidant level up for Sai to this scene and end it with a nice friendly moment between the two before they head for LeBlanc. At this point, we more or less rejoin the existing script, except at some point have Futaba show us her full recording of the phone conversation between Akechi and Shido. This conversation also strongly implied that they would be killing the SIU director. And with that, we cut our losses and move on. At least, that's the best I can come up with right now. But hey, maybe the actual writers could do a better job than me. In fact, I'm fairly confident they could. Anyway, November 21st. Ah, right, there's a short bit of everyone at LeBlanc before Joker's brought in to reunite with them all. That's easy. Start the scene with Joker's entrance. The 21st also has a couple scenes with Akechi and Shido. In the first one, they discuss how evil they are with each other, then in the second one, they reminisce about their evilness. At least, that's what I think those scenes were about. Regardless, they're expendable. Unless you think it's super important to have the bad guy's plans up to this point spelled out for you. As far as I could tell, it was a mix of superfluous details and stuff we already had at least a vague idea of. So yeah, I'm not mourning the loss of these scenes. Now, starting from November 22nd, other party members are used as stand-ins for Joker to show us subway and classroom scenes. I'm not going to keep track of all these. Their general purpose is to show us that the public is becoming very pro-Shido and anti-Phantom Thieves. They can make use of the TV some more if they really think that needs to be hammered into us. Fast forward to December 1st. In Shido's palace, there's a scene with Makoto and Ryuji at the restaurant while trying to get the letter of recommendation from the guy there. I'm really just mentioning this for thoroughness' sake, as it can probably be assumed that Joker's close enough to hear them. If not, make it so. Then after we get the letter, we cut to a scene of Shido on the phone with the real guy reaffirming what we already just learned from his shadow. This was redundant to begin with. Ditto for the guy with the next letter. On December 6th, Akechi is on TV again declaring that he'll destroy the remaining Phantom Thieves. When an audience member's phone goes off, Akechi seems to have an epiphany. If we want to keep this, then Joker will have to see it on TV. Which would be kinda tricky, as we're currently inside Shido's palace and it's possible to get all the way to the fight with Akechi in the same visit. It could be a scene you see that night if and only if you leave the palace before fighting Akechi, or a cognitive barrier could be added to Shido's palace to force you to see it. Otherwise, I guess it has to be cut. Oh, and there's a part where we randomly get a thought monologue from Akechi that gives us a small vague glimpse of his past and motives. That part would have to be cut even if we do see the rest of it on TV, but we hear all about Akechi's past when we meet him in the palace. A bit later, we see Shido telling Akechi to promptly take care of any suspicious mental shutdown clients. Akechi finds his hurriedness curious, basically more foreshadowing that he'll be catching up to us in the palace. Can be cut. On December 11th, after fighting Akechi, we briefly see him and Cognitive him pointing guns at each other behind the big metal door. Just keep the camera on Joker's side of the door, we'll still hear the gunshot. Our next big scene comes on December 16th when we send Shido his calling card. There's not really any important information in these scenes, but there is a whole lot of awesomeness. The most important part, the calling card itself, luckily can be preserved by having Joker, and perhaps the others, out in the street when it happens, kinda like they are for Shido's response a bit later. We'd be limited to a single crowd of bystander reactions, but that mostly just means we lose various police and other henchmen of Shido's panicking and trying to figure out what's going on. Don't think that's too big a deal. We'd also lose Shido's reaction right after, but it's basically just the typical, yep, his shadow's pissed confirmation that we'll figure out when we get into the palace anyway. Then there's the scenes of both Sai and Sojiro being taken for questioning. This is a bit regrettable to lose, but there's not much to be done about it. Same goes for the various confidants throwing out random pro-Phantom Thief sentiments, except Oya and Mishida, since the party actually sees them. Then after we defeat Shido, there's a scene of him taking some temporary death medicine which causes his palace to collapse. Like, more so than it was already going to. You can either have it happen as is, with Morgana or Futaba inferring that Shido must have done something to himself when we see Shadow Shido go poof and the palace starts imploding, which they actually already do a bit, or we can just ditch the whole death drug thing, because all palaces implode when we take the treasures, and this isn't our first escape sequence anyway. Then there's another scene of Shido waking up from the death drug with an obvious change of heart. We'll learn of our success soon enough when he goes on TV. Anyway, after we're finally back home and in bed on this long, exciting day, Morgana has this freaky dream again, which needs to be cut again. If you still want a little something here, Joker can wake up and ask Morgana if he's okay again. December 18th, we see a crowd watching Shido's press conference. We can keep the TV stuff as Joker is no doubt watching it, just cut the crowd reactions, or put Joker in the crowd if you really want them. Later on, we see some jackasses I don't care about talking about how to clean up and cover their jackass asses after Shido's change of heart. On to the 23rd, Sai is taken off the Shido case. She already relays this development to us via Makoto immediately after. Later on, after Joker falls asleep, Morgana talks to himself a bit. Nothing important. And now, the beginning of the ending, December 24th. As we enter Mementos, there's a brief exchange between An and Haru where they comment on how Morgana has been acting weird. This is nothing but a little foreshadowing, and honestly, we can see for ourselves that Morgana's been acting a little weird. No need to spoon-feed her foreshadowing. Still, if you really want it, just have Joker within earshot. After that, we go all the way through the depths of Mementos, at which point everything goes white and Morgana hears an unknown voice, then declares that he remembers everything. In other words, more expendable foreshadowing. Then we have all our confidants taking turns saying, "What the fuck?" as Mementos fuses with the real world. This is a nice little nod to your confidants, but really doesn't add much and would have to be cut. And throughout the final stretch of the final dungeon, after each mini-boss, there's some scenes of random nameless NPCs starting to panic. The party actually sees the first one, as we're still pretty low, I guess. Regardless, make them see the others as well or cut them. Either way works for me. And that brings us to the final boss, during which we see our confidants cheer us on and get all the other random NPCs to cheer us on too. This massive support is what lets Joker stand back up and summon Satanael, who proceeds to headshot the boss. This would basically need to be changed to an audio-only thing. The party hears everyone cheering for them already, so we just hear it along with them. If you want, you can have visions or cognitions or whatever of the confidants show up while they're each taking their turns cheering. And with that, the final boss has been defeated. Of course, we're still not quite to the end of the story. However, I'm once again going to say that we could choose to cheat and change the perspective at this point by calling the rest of the story the epilogue. I don't know what the general opinion on the matter is, but I know it's not unheard of for epilogues to take a different perspective than the rest of a narrative. If we did want to go that route though, I think I'd still change quite a bit of what remains. I won't go into too much detail cause, well, I don't fucking want to. Briefly though, I would change things so that Joker doesn't have to turn himself in until the 26th, and Christmas would be changed to be the day that you go around and talk to all your confidants one last time. The Valentine's Day event would be moved to Christmas night. Joker wouldn't be a douche that doesn't tell his girlfriend about what's going on, though that's admittedly unrelated to the rest of this. And finally, as Joker goes to sleep that night, we see his farewell with Igor and Lavenza. And this is where the perspective changes. We can move on to the existing scene of the rest of the party finding out about it and continue as is. Except I would actually cut the scenes with Joker from here on, remove him completely from the perspective of the story, and maybe even go a bit deeper into everyone else fighting to get him freed. Lead up to a scene of Joker's release being announced and everyone celebrating, then roll credits. Finally, after the credits, give a short scene of Joker reuniting with everyone. Oh, and I guess squeeze Morgana's resurrection into it all somewhere. Now, that's a lot more drastic of a change than most of what I've done here, but I think it's a more proper way to go about a perspective shift in the epilogue than just playing things out as they are. But anyway, we've gone this far, so let's see what it'd look like in the first person through to the end. Back to December 25th, we would have to cut the scene with everyone finding out that Joker's in jail, or alternatively, have this happen before Joker actually leaves and give everyone a chance to say goodbye to him in the morning. And then the scenes of the party starting their plan and the scenes of the various confidants rallying people to Joker's support would all have to be cut. I suppose you could replace them with people visiting Joker in jail or something, but I think that'd be a pretty poor substitute. Not really sure what else you could do though. And finally, on March 20th, after Joker leaves Laban to head home, Sojiro wipes a tear from his eye. Cut it. I'm fucking done. Fine, I guess I can do some kind of conclusion or wrap-up or some shit. Let's see. As you may have surmised, a lot of shit would have to change to keep Persona 5's story in the first-person perspective. The most pervasive losses would be the going-ons of the antagonists and foreshadowing. Lots and lots and lots of foreshadowing. Honestly, first time I played the game, I don't think I ever got too annoyed or tired of all the foreshadowing, except for a few occasions where they blatantly hint at the same thing again and again. It sure as hell got tiresome on the second playthrough, though. Admittedly, that's not a fair assessment, given that I was making myself take notes on a lot of it, but I do think a good portion of the foreshadowing was superfluous at best. Regardless, I don't think the loss of foreshadowing required for a first-person perspective would be anything to lament. As for the going-ons of the antagonists, I'd say that has a bit more value overall. It definitely can be interesting to get to know the bad guys a bit. Fortunately though, the whole palace setup of this game allows us to learn a lot about them even without seeing them directly, so I don't think too much value would be lost. Akechi would probably be hit the hardest unless we have Sai tell us about all their conversations, but I still think he would be developed well enough. Outside of those, there were a handful of significant unique losses, mostly in regards to the impact of a scene's presentation, most notably, in my opinion, being the events immediately following the end of the interrogation. I did my best to present good alternatives to these scenes, and I'm sure the actual writers could do an even better job of it than I did. And that's most of what's lost. Honestly, I don't think it's too bad, especially if you consider that they could have written with a first-person perspective in mind from the start rather than trying to alter the omniscient perspective scene by scene like I did. Of course, large or small, a loss is still a loss, so there'd have to be something gained for this change to even be worth considering. So what's being gained by keeping a first-person perspective? Well, first off, there's the integrity of it. Like I've said, the story itself establishes a framing device, then proceeds to utilize the framing when it's convenient and completely ignore it when it's inconvenient. Now, some of you may be laughing at the idea of integrity having inherent value, but personally, I want games and their stories to be taken seriously. I mean, would you feel the same way if a book or a movie ignored its own established perspective like that? If so, at least you're consistent. Anyway, the other notable benefit of a first-person perspective would be reinforcing to the player that they're playing as Joker. I mean, that's the whole fucking point of him being a fucking silent protagonist, right? So wouldn't it be a good thing for the narrative's perspective to make you feel like you're seeing the world through Joker's eyes? Give a little emphasis to the role-playing aspect of this role-playing game? Personally, I think the game could have been better for it. But that's just my opinion. Honestly, I'm not that intent on convincing you all to agree with me. My main goal here is simply to get you thinking about something that many of you probably never even noticed, and to see what other people's thoughts are on the matter. So what do you think? Would Persona 5's story have been better or worse with a first-person perspective? Let me know and have an awesome day.